There's a funny thing about a story continuing. The implication is that although it already started, it hasn't yet untangled all the threads. Yet, the details may, and likely will, update in ways that alter everything you thought you knew about the plot itself. New characters, scenery, and motivations are almost certain to emerge. Love's lost, won, and revealed to never actually having existed to begin with. Or maybe it did, but just meant something else that was every bit as beautiful, and even more so. But not everyone appreciates that sort of thing. Anyway, let's talk about Crash Bandicoot. When I picked up the game at a musty suburban garage sale, I was just a kid. We're all kids once. You were one as well, after the sperm and egg cells fused. I always thought that even basic reproductive science is just nuts. But so is the very essence of reality. A matter of observer, like Einsteinian relativity. Crap. We're supposed to be talking about Crash Bandicoot. Yeah, we already are. You just don't know it yet. Let's continue. There was a garage band playing at that garage sale, which I guess was kind of witty. I asked them to play Freebird, but their mohawked lead singer flippantly responded with a, "Here, have this bird for free," flipping me a bony, crooked middle finger. Oh, well. Never meet your idols. Just kidding. I'd rather free the bird in my pants and take a whiz on his band's demo than pay his alleged music any more moments of mind. So, bottom line is this: I was always a Crash Bandicoot obsessionist. Ever since I was a loin fruit promise in my mama's womb, I practically spun around and shouted "Utabaga!" the ultrasound. Of course, Crash Bandicoot wasn't a thing yet, as I was born in the 1980s. The guy asked for $3, but I'm a cheapskate, and I made him settle on $1.25 and a nearly expired coupon for an Egg McMuffin. Okay, truth is, I was broke. That meant I'd temporarily go hungry just to take another stab at the apple as the universally beloved orange marsupial. It was a sacrifice kid me was willing to make. I needed to be Crash Bandicoot. What was weird was that the guy who sold me the game insisted that he never even bothered to play it because he already lived it. Claimed that his name was Lewis and that this copy of the game was gifted to him from his time as an intern for Naughty Dog. He looked so sad, sounded so sad. Really should have been a more than subtle clue that something sinister was afoot. You'll never know what I have lost, Lewis muttered, voice trailing off into a whisper. Or really never had. Because I was born compromised. Yeah, he sure did seem to have problems. The guy was tripping over his own 2 feet, talking to himself, eyes contorting. I don't think he needed the money. He just wanted to release the burden of owning things that owned a part of his soul that he never really intended on gifting away. When I got home, I pressed play on my Freebird MP3, rocking out so hard in defiance of the punk rock menace from earlier. Couldn't help but feel unnerved by Lewis's depressing remarks, though. He was gentlemanly enough to leave me his phone number if I needed help. Why would I need tips from a guy who never played the game? Maybe he was just lonely. I barely even met him, but I couldn't help but care so much about the guy. He seemed so lovable for a fellow with a heart full of sorrow and regret. Okay, so that's when I whipped out the controller and booted up the game. The goofy intro played out as normal, or so it would have if it wasn't for one glaring omission. Crash's eyes were missing. In their place, jammed directly into Crash Bandicoot's polygonal eye sockets, were Wumpa Fruit, the mango-esque food items that Crash collects throughout each level, just like Super Mario coins. There was a message in the usual font at the bottom of the screen about being careful what you wish for, because you may have already had it all along, quote unquote. Huh? I was here to play Crash Bandicoot, not wax philosophy. I mashed the start button in the hope of escaping this horribly disturbing sequence. But even when I selected for a new game, there was an excruciatingly slow fade out, as if I was being personally taunted. But then, out of the actual black, there was a horribly disfigured claymation Crash Bandicoot with serpents slithering out of his eye sockets. An unnerving visual manifestation paired with a shrill scream of unbridled pain, unlike any that I'd ever heard in a video game from any time period, retro or modern, blared out of my television speakers as I covered my ears with my hands and closed my eyes. Wumpa Fruit in the eyes. Serpents in the eyes. Adam and Eve? But where was Eve? Was I reading way too much into this? The scream sequence played out in a stop-motion claymation style before surprisingly fading to black mid-sequence. After however many seconds, a dusty gray text box appeared on the TV, stating 5 obtuse words I couldn't make head nor tail of at first. The apple of your eye. The apple of your eye? Was that when you adore something above all others and hold it close and dear? What did that have to do with anything? I had to wonder about this copy of this game. Maybe it was a prank or practical joke that the guys at Naughty Dog played out on Lewis? Hoping to calm down my racing thoughts, I checked my phone for companionship. There was a text from Lewis. Remember, you need tips and I'm around. No, if you need, just you need. Regardless, that was nice of him and all, but it felt unnecessary, unless he knew something I didn't know. The first actual level was Insanity Beach. I remembered it from when I played the game as a kid, so that checked out. Started off with Crash making the same confused face that I always remembered him making. It actually took a minute or two of gameplay before I realized something was even off. As you probably already know, Crash Bandicoot wears jeans. There was a conscious decision by Naughty Dog to make Crash appear hip, relatable to younger audiences. Just like how Sonic's angry stare and finger wag gave him both attitude and a leg up on the other video game mascot competition. But this time, in this copy of this game, Crash was wearing dark gray sweatpants. And something else was even more problematic: his jump. It was slower and didn't go nearly as high up as it should. The cutesy noises Crash makes when he hit were replaced with moans and grunts, too. That's really depressing, honestly. Was Naughty Dog mocking Lewis as a broken man who simply couldn't help himself? All these little things couldn't prepare me for what happened when I hit my first question mark rate. You see, when you hit a question mark rate in those old Crash games, you're rewarded with something sweet. Surplus of Wumpa Fruit most of the time. But this time was different. Crash Bandicoot thinned out into an ethereal velvet mist, reappearing in a new scene that was obviously a game show set. There are podiums, microphones, stacks of cue cards, and a game board on the wall with a picture of Crash sticking his tongue out contortedly. The host was wearing a hood, carrying a scythe in his bony hand, and, well, it was obvious that that had to be the Grim Reaper. Well, that was fine, I guessed. Until the text showed up. Hello, Lewis. Lewis? Lewis? Is it my Lewis? Our Lewis? Why did I care so much about this guy's happiness? Either way, this copy of the game must have been specially made for him. Welcome to the bonus round. And now for your big question. There was a pause before more on-screen dialogue appeared. What is love? A freeform dialogue box and a cursor appeared. Using my PlayStation controller, I could shift through alphanumerical characters and compose an answer. I had no idea how the game wanted me to consider this question. I thought things over a little before tapping in an answer about feeling accepted and submitting it to the hostess approval. He shook his primitive 3D polygon rendered head at me in disappointment. Wrong, he exclaimed. Text, but not voice acting, but I felt so startled by it anyway. He slammed down a lever that electrocuted Crash Bandicoot into a pile of ashes. I could have just touched you to kill you, Crash Bandicoot. With an answer like that, you aren't even worthy of touching. You haven't evolved from the disadvantages you were born into, and it looks like you never, ever will. You're weird! Crash reappeared where it initially hit the question mark box. I had lost a life. A loud, drawn-out moaning sound played, and not just in the background of the audio, but clearly at the front of the mix. This game really wanted me to know that I screwed up. I thought about the answer that I submitted some more. Acceptance. Love is an acceptance, according to this hacked version of Crash Bandicoot 1. Or 2. 1. I couldn't think clearly anymore. Maybe the game was looking for a more specific answer. I sprinted through the rest of the level, spinning through turtles, collecting Wumpa fruit, and otherwise having a very good time. Until I'd beaten the level. You see, at the end of the stages in the first Crash Bandicoot, there's a check by the game to see if you smashed all the crates in the level. If you do, you're rewarded with a silver clear gem, and if you don't, you get to watch wooden crates smash against Crash Bandicoot's head, as if to punish him for not being more astute. As for this copy of the game, I could feel my eyes bulge and my jaw practically snap toward the floor when I saw. It looked like pills. Lots of them. They were falling from the sky, engulfing the orange marsupial. There was no way to control Crash and escape them. He was being smothered before my very eyes. I was helpless but to watch. When the screen was finally covered in its entirety by little white and yellow pills, a gloomy gray text, much like the one from earlier, appeared on screen. All the unwanted children, do they not deserve an opportunity to be loved? There was a pause, and then another text. That means you! I stared at the screen fumingly, angrily, before springing to my feet to go shut off my PlayStation gaming console. What in the world did that quest have to do with anything? Lewis was an unwanted, unloved child, and this was somehow his own fault. That was when my phone rang. It was Lewis. Lewis? I began. The game they gifted you is crazy, man. There was a lengthy pause, then a sigh, then a moan, deep, dark, and reminiscent. Reminiscent of the moan from the Crash Bandicoot game I was playing. Do you remember what I told you earlier? About getting in touch if I needed help? The other thing? The deal we made about the McDonald's coupon? No. Keep going. Well, this was seriously confusing. I don't remember, man. There was that garage band, but that has nothing to do with anything. Then my heart practically burst out of my chest. On the other end of the phone call, I could hear animalistic grunts. Uh, Lewis, e- everything all right, man? It was so unusual to be this concerned about someone I barely knew. Some people say that a smart dog has the brain of a 2-year-old human, but that a naughty dog simply thinks like an unwanted child at all times. Usually, naughty dogs are naughty because they weren't raised right, but genetics are at play here too. And with that, I heard a beep. Phone was dead. Conversation over. I was alone with my PlayStation again. This being the strange gameplay disc of mine. I cracked my knuckles and went back to the game, pressing through that birth control scene I had just witnessed. I was expecting to return to the game's island map en route to the Jungle Rollers level, but instead, Crash was in a cemetery. A fully 3D rendered cemetery that you could walk around 360 degrees in, unlike your usual Crash Bandicoot games. There was a sound of sobbing, but I had no idea which direction it was in. I tried to move Crash to the east away from the cemetery gate, but a ghostly sigh drew itself out when I tried. I could no longer move Crash at all. The morbid gray text from earlier reemerged. Now it just read, "Why?" Confused and concerned, I tried to get Crash running again. Then the text transitioned to, "Why do you bother?" And the freeform text response control from earlier appeared again. I scratched my ears, I often do when I'm bewildered. The last time the game asked me a question, it seemed offended by my response. What could it possibly want me to say now? Lightning strikes illuminated the garden of the deceased, as if to suggest, well, to be honest, I'm not sure, but it sure felt like the game was trying to teach me something. Why bother? I repeated the question to myself. I pressed in my answer. Love. Suddenly the screen froze up. Perhaps this meant I won? But no. No, that wasn't what it meant at all. The camera zoomed further and further down to Earth until it narrowed in on Crash Bandicoot's furry marsupial face. While this happened, everything on screen was eerily still, as if time itself had stopped on itself. Then, then Crash Bandicoot winked at me. Once. A pause. Then again. And really fast. Rapidly. In a booming, lightning fast succession until stop motion. Claymation. Crash Bandicoot melted before my very eyes into a pile of blood, guts, bone, and sinew. Crash Bandicoot games were known to have humorous death scene animations, but this was just eerie and depressing. A gloomy, ambient composition that resembled unmitigated, unbridled despair played out, while lightning struck the Crash Bandicoot goo pile corpse again and again, as if to mock my answer and further humiliate him, as if he was still conscious. The screen filled up, flooded with dusty, gray, ominous text. Why do you bother? Why do you bother? Why do you bother? Why do you bother? It must have been a minute or two of the camera zooming in on the words and the sullen orchestration crescendoing before the text disappeared. The camera took us to the source of the sobbing. It was Crash Bandicoot's good friend Tana. My mind raced with a million questions. How does she know in advance that he was going to die? If she didn't, then what was that sobbing that occurred before Crash's death about? Why had they even chosen to go to a graveyard in the first place? I, I really, really needed someone to share this startling series of experiences with. I called Lewis, but there was no answer. I left a voicemail practically in tears, begging for him to pick up the phone, but it wasn't happening. The game wasn't changing to any new scenes or levels either. It was just Tawna sobbing at a grave again and again and again. The gothic gray words, "It might just be a hallucination," faded into view. I lost track of time when the doorbell rang. Happy to have any sort of distraction from this miserable scene, I bolted up and opened the door. To be greeted by a police detective of all people. "Hello there, sir," he greeted me. "This was addressed to you from a man named Lewis Diggs. The boys down at the station thought you should have it." I agreed. "I'm not sure I follow," I replied, though in my heart I could tell where this conversation was heading. "Mr. Diggs has passed away, sir." Was it painful?" I instinctively replied. "Found him fried, sir. Horribly burnt. Melted away as if by acid," he responded, keeping a still expression on his face. "My sympathies if he was a friend of yours, sir." He handed me a package and I thanked him before noticing that he was wearing an orange lapel pin that resembled a canine paw. The Naughty Dog logo? On a police officer. Oh, at this point I was really exhausted of today's events, but also morbidly curious. I ripped open the package to find two items, a several-page letter and a mango-esque fruit that resembled the Wumpa objects from the game. Hoping to also discover some quick answers, I skipped ahead to the last paragraph of the letter, which read, "While I hate to sign off, I think I've said enough. It's becoming harder and harder for me to write. I noticed I can't get myself to speak many words either. Just let it be known what's really going on here. I know no one can help me, so I'm making a fresh start far away in that place that was modeled out just for me. Hopefully, it is where Dr. Neocortex will never find me again, and life will cease to imitate art. They wouldn't come up with such a getaway plot just to torture and humiliate me. Right? I know the phrase, 'not everyone is your friend,' but doesn't there have to be somebody out there? With love, Lewis." With love? To me? A guy he sold a game to at a yard sale? Well, that was one thing, but what stuck out even more was how similar his handwriting was to mine. Practically identical. Hmm. I took the mango and rolled it around in my hands, inspecting it as if there were clues to be found. Looked healthy enough to eat, and a little in the fridge other than condiments. Lewis seemed like a friendly enough guy, and furthermore, he worked for Naughty Dog or the police. Anyway, maybe before he passed, he intended to gift this to me as a Crash-themed present. He must have been terribly lonely if he had nobody else to turn to. I took a bite into the mango before spitting it out. Yuck! What was this? Some kind of sadistic tropical-inspired hybrid of acidic poisoned island fruit and fish-filled garbage? The worst part of it all was that I bit into something sharp that cut the roof of my mouth like a needle. Before I knew it, I was woozy, and I passed out. When I woke up, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I was in the dirt. Some kind of ditch. It was too tall for me to climb out of. I didn't know how I got there, but somehow there I was, and I felt different. I looked downward and also felt extremely disturbed. My dark sweatpants had been removed and replaced with stylish blue jeans. Someone had changed my clothes while I was asleep. But who? Then I heard a rattling from the ground, as well as earth shaking. Little armadillo creatures? What? I didn't know why or how, but I could tell they were trying to kill me. I couldn't run away, so I did what suddenly felt natural and pounced on them as I miraculously flipped over and vanished into thin air. The platform rose from the ground. Rather than ask questions, I leapt on top of the thing and soared onward and upward and out of the dirty pit. When I took a look at my new surroundings, I was greeted by a familiar sight. Just not an environment that I'd experienced before in the flesh. It was a cemetery. The cemetery. The one the emotional scene from the game was based off of. I felt a chill run down my spine as I ran and ran, hoping for the entrance gate and a way back home. But then I heard crying? It was as if a predestined force overtook me. I kept running, racing, into the direction of the familiar sound, until I was frozen stiff. Because I saw her. A beautiful girl, some around my age, different hair color from me, but I didn't have much hair to begin with. She lifted up her head as the sobbing stopped, and she stared directly into my soul with piercing, otherworldly eyes. Louis? Are you my Louis? Predestiny took over again, this time in the form of my voice. Tana? There was a warm embrace, but it felt different than the way I used to communicate with her. Yet it was so much deeper than the way it was before. Not just emotions, but it was something actually truly, wholesomely real this time. But how did I know this previous life of mine? I felt a sudden wave of disapproval from above, and then another wave, one of intense static electricity, and I blacked out again. When I woke up this time, I was strapped in a hardened metallic chair. I could see beakers, desks, filing cabinets. I was imprisoned in a lab. Very interesting. A short man with angry eyebrows and an N tattooed on his forehead asserted. Very interesting indeed. He let out a contorted, sinister chuckle. It's good to have you home, Louis. The simulation takes its toll on people who get all lovey-dovey rather than performing its intended bidding. He began, with an ominous foreshadowing in his voice. Especially when the years roll by before they start figuring things out. Crash Bandicoot, I'd say you've been remastered. I let out a shrill scream as the tiny doctor proffered me a hand mirror, an exposed marsupial body, piercing green eyes, and a black-nosed snout stared back at me as I lost my mind, spun around like a Tasmanian devil, and forced my way out of the straps that bound me, leaping out of the laboratory window and into the roaring ocean blue below. I was finally free.